Now imagine if we could just plug a person, just any person ever on okay, anyone who's existed. You could probably think this person throughout the history that we've is probably far years and complaints and so forth. And gets this far. In other words, he's barely eking out and providing with a relatively low life expectancy. And so there's been an observation made by Ricardo Malthus, an economist, the Enlightenment period, and eventually it gives his name to this concept known as the Malthusian trap. Okay? And so, in other words, what it means is this. So you can imagine a funky guy here living in any period of time about the ancient classical post-classical period. Okay? Depending on the time period you're living in, it could be going pretty well, or things could be going bad. For example, hey, like right now, there's some sort of pandemic going on, and people dying left and right, and so his survive and produce goods and items is lower than ever before. But imagine almost always historically recovery time, and so things get better, better and better. Hey, he's survived. He has children, several more than children. Many of them live to adulthood, and then another crisis, a land crisis. There's not enough food and the resources. There's a war. There's another pandemic. There's something to that extent, leading to all of a sudden a decline in human production, until finally, when things it seems like can get worse, things do better. Like we see Black Death resulting in the Renaissance and so forth. But hey, Malthus takes observation and says, "Hey, you want human? It's like a trap, because just when you think things are getting better and more resources, you're living a better life with a higher standard of living, things get worse." That's human history. Fortunately for us, we live in what is known as the post-industrial era. Revergence in history is we live in right now, where we have broken out of this trap, standard of living ever. So much so that Peter Stearns, a history, um, uh, uh, a founder of sorts, said this, the Industrial Revolution constituted one of those occasions in world history when human species altered its framework of existence. Indeed, only developed comparable terms of sheer magnitude was the Neolithic Revolution. Say, both brought fundamental changes in how people work, where they live, what potential economic surplus was available, and how many people could be supported around the world. These changes reaching and that in other words made the Industrial Revolution the Industrial Revolution. Now, this is a topic that you've been through before on multiple occasions. Your eighth grade U.S. history class, you'll get again next year U.S. history. And so I'm not spend too much time on what it is per se. A little of that in terms of definition, but I want to focus more on the origin spread of the Industrial Revolution. So let's go and start off with a few definitions. The first of all, okay, the Industrial Revolution is different in that the ability of humankind to work is always rely on either natural power, okay, or particularly human power. All of a sudden, that changes because now, 19th and early in the 20th century, there is power yourself through fossil fuels. That is going to be really critical. Okay? Furthermore, okay, this power is going to allow for goods to be made not by hand, but by machines on a primary basis. So there's always machines before, but the ability to power is always limited. Once you now have this source potentially of almost seems like unlimited power, okay, you can now power most machines by this new source of energy. But you also will need a amount of labor. So this isn't the automation of the 21st century where all of a sudden now you feel like jobs are limited. No, no. You still need human hands. They will just be operating in different ways and on different fronts more effectively, more efficiently. And then you still need people and you need that labor, and that labor is going to be different as well. There are also major technological changes as well, okay, in terms of what is produced, and two different phases. The first phase of the Industrial Revolution was the creation of produced textiles, transport across using steam. And 20th century, we get a second phase, a much more advanced phase, including things like the production of steel, everybody's favorite subject right now, chemistry, and the use and the creation of manufactured chemicals and others, and finally electricity to be able to power plants and so forth. Okay, but the end result we talk about not just simply economic, but there are going to political and social changes as well. Add a further division of labor, right, between skilled and unskilled labor. Again, you need a lot of people working as in unskilled, simple task jobs that are very long and not interesting and free dangerous. These new factory systems whereby you're working a single project or a single task for hours out and create these new classes, particularly work classes. Okay, and then finally, result that a immense increase in the amount of goods that now are being exported all across the globe. They have the need to get resources, okay, to produce all these items, and so European powers are going to go around the world as they can to try to obtain all new resources and other and so forth in order to create these finished products and goods. Now, if I were to ask you a question, and let's just make a hypothetical here. Hey, if, say, for example, you put a gun to my head and it is the 1600s, 1700s, and you asked me, or you told me, this is this thing called the Industrial Revolution, hey, I would give you an answer. What part of the world is from? If I had only one chance and was on the line, and it's 16th or 1600, 1600, then no better than China. Because after all, think of all of the advances that China has made throughout what we've seen so far here. So I'm going to have you answer this question in the lecture document. This is question 1 on China. What were some of the technological advancements made in China prior to and the Song period? Okay. So if you answer off the top of your head, fantastic. If not, take page 372 to 377, particularly the early pages in your textbook, to answer this question. So right now, go ahead and pause the video and go and answer this question. All right, guys, back. Hopefully, we've answered the question sufficiently here, and a table to demonstrate what China was. I love this chart here. These are particular inventions. The intent it would you figure out a prediction, either figure out themselves or that these ideas be transmitted from Asia to Europe over time. Centuries paper, wheelbarrow, crying out loud. So this is going to have that effect. But I would put my money on China. So it's the question, why not? What we're going to look at is why the Industrial Revolution didn't happen in China. Okay? Moving into the realm of historical argument. Okay? There's evidence for this, but we don't know for sure. They argue pointed by historians regarding a number of these things here, includes one that your textbook brings up as well. Okay, this wonderful advancement going on in the Han Dynasty that turns out might not be the best for some kind of an economic revolution. For instance, okay, a Ming scientist, Song Xing, who had written a pivotal thesis in chemistry, said this about his book he had discovered. An ambitious scholar, someone part served, undoubtedly his book onto his desk and get no is no way concerned with the art of advancement in officialdom. In other words, science gets you nowhere. What you need to learn, however, are things like important subjects like literature and history. Another observation made by the priest Matteo Ricci, who uh, emperors kept around because he could make really good maps that put China in the middle of everything. He said the study of mathematics and medicine held in low esteem because they are not fostered by honors as the study of philosophy, to which students are attracted by the hope of the glory and the rewards attached to it. So, in other words, everybody wants it's like a college where everybody wants to be a history or an English major instead of a study major. So that's one potential difference. Another is long-standing history of anti-merchant policies by the Chinese. Okay, going all the way to the Han Dynasty, major restrictions like when merchants can actually make exchanges, walled places that would close down, banning laws, um, types of goods that they could sell were limited, freedom of movement were all limited. And historically, other than the Yuan Dynasty under the Mongols, have always been seen as a lower class group. Furthermore, Neo-Confucianism and Taoism both have inward focus, either on your family or on your own personal improvement, that doesn't make a push for examining the outer, particularly the physical world around you, and that might result in a lack of scientific inquiry. Okay? Another is China's isolationism. Not that China was isolated from the world. Think about China's impact on Japan, Korea, South Asia, and others. But more so, you have some self-imposed that would limit outward expansion, and particularly parity with Europe. Whereas Europe finds itself at the age of discovery, China, on the other hand, limits the ability of its people to explore. And laws after out, which turned really costly, laws that kept going very far, and laws regarding size of ships. And furthermore, there were people that were immigrating to China. And so, because of the labor plus in China, there weren't many people coming in, settling in, and getting new on China like we find the move in Europe. And lastly, Chinese language. If you guys have ever tried to study Chinese, it is hard. The pictograms mean that in order to learn the language, you're going to have to memorize thousands and thousands of characters of languages. Okay, all you need to know are letters, punctuation, and then you can create all sorts of stuff from there. It's just simply easier. For example, this in the 13th century, it would take 7 months to print about 100 copies of a 6,000 character book using and get 30,000 wood blocks. Compared to the movable type of Europe, all of a sudden just need maybe 100 characters, 150 in order to create a book. A dramatic difference. Okay. But there's more to this. Okay. There are various changes in regards to China. Well, so there's just what led to the eventual decline of China as well in the 17th century. So that's review question number 2 for you. And if you need to review this, go ahead and take a look at your text, pages 499 to 500. So go ahead and pause the video right there before we continue the rest of the lecture. All right, guys, we're back. So with that in mind, if not China, then, okay, so if we look at this particular chart, you may think it looks like good. That's not bad as well. Perhaps, even after, perhaps maybe the Ottoman Empire, so forth. Really, instead, you get, instead of China, and look at the decline here, you have is Europe and West United States and so forth here. And so much so that by 20th century, here we are in the 20th century, is the ocean. This industrial in the West make that leads eventually to of United States and Western Europeans, clearly important points in Great Britain. Okay? So why Great Britain? Let's go and spend some time and take a look at so why so in this case here. So five explanations. One is middle capitalist institution. Two is cultural revolution. Three, importance of invention. Five, consistency in government. Okay, so let's go and take a look at this first piece here. Okay, unlike even the continent of Europe, okay, the bourgeoisie, middle class, the city dwellers were much more numerous in than in others, and as it turns out, they are also wealthier and often as influential as nobility. Okay, so as a result of this government policy that's being made in parliament and influence the king is oftentimes influenced by the bourgeois turn woman. Again, here's key historical set up our political revolutions, the industrial revolution, the birth of enlightenment, and in this case, is the ability of individuals to pursue their wants, their desires, and not only that, for a government to value and particularly a right to, as law calls it, the right to life, liberty, and the ownership of property to be able to possess for yourself. Jefferson says this is so important that he says is the right life, liberty, and happiness, almost as related to the owning of property as well. But the English also established our strong capitalist institutions, particularly creation of a stable currency. Now, we talked about pre-unit silver was the primary currency. Eventually, over time, even silver, particularly in coin, are still really difficult to use for transactions. And it trade Italy in previous time periods, there's been usage of paper money or banknotes, and that itself is going to create some of the paper money banknote systems whereby they ensure that inflation does not always happen, does not happen frequently, because must back paper currency with gold. Okay? And so treasuries of gold be held by the amount of paper money is allowed in circulation be decided by these national banks. And there are we national economic policies. Another major push made by the British in copying what was going on in the Netherlands are the development of stock markets and private exchanges, allowing for the building of joint stock companies and major capital investments that allow for the creation of factories and other goods. What first a what sort of greased wheels of British capitalism was silver. So as the Spanish silver was in Great Spain, it was fantastic for the rest of Western Europe in getting a capital resource to create the industrial. You have all these people now moving into the cities in order to join in these factory work, and what makes that happen is an increase in agricultural production in Great Britain. There's really of reasons why agricultural production increases in Britain, one of which was the enclosure movement. A number of common shared that were utilized in old feudal estates. All of a sudden, those came up for sale, and there are investments that were made by um, individuals who, instead of creating these small farms, would create these large export-based farms that all of a sudden increase production of crops, not just for sustenance, but particularly for investment and sales on the markets. Okay. New technologies such as crop rotation, being able to grow crops of different types to replenish the soil. And so you would grow one good on a piece of land here and continue to do so with a different crop that may replenish the nutrients to increase agriculture production. New scientific inventions and discoveries like the seed drill, and of course, like we had discussed previously, the impact of the Columbian Exchange in creating these high calorie goods that may, in the end, sustain lower class populations like corn and particularly the potato, which actually ended up feeding a number of the poor, not just in England, but also particularly the Irish as well. Okay, so there's an agricultural revolution, and you can't get away with this without a little bit of luck. Okay, in that Great Britain has, being an island nation, okay, means that it has a strong maritime tradition. Okay, ships going in and out, and so you're producing goods, and there's always already the infrastructure to be able to move these goods across not just continents but also the world as well. Okay, one thing that they could not control is where those dinosaurs died. Okay, and if you know your hey, a little bit about the origins of coal, for instance, and what it takes to create coal. Hey, um, you can't control this. And so the British would luck out with a number of coal deposits in both Scotland, in northern England, and Wales as well, whereby the close proximity of coal is going to allow them to easily transport this to their factories and also power the rail lines that will eventually crisscross Great Britain as well. And so that itself is, you could say, a stroke of luck in of itself here. Okay? And as a result of its geographic position, okay, in eventually searching for a route west to India and Asia, they discovered North America, and in doing so, created a set of colonies in what will become known as the United States and Canada as well. Even though the United States had declared independence, the United States and Britain will continue to be close trading partners regardless of the conflicts between them over time. And what that's going to create for Britain is this constant source of natural resource of timber, sugar, foodstuff, cotton, both from America, Canada, and also from the West Indies as well. Okay. There is also in Great Britain an intellectual revolution whereby you have enough scientific and industrial inquiry to create all sorts of new inventions that people hoping to create money and get rich, get wealthy to become more efficient. And what Britain does is, in its democratic style government, it calls for the protection of property and those individual um, in enlightenment ideas, right, that are essential in the protecting property would create things like patents and others to protect ideas so that they're developing them and constantly growing in them because of the pursuit of profit. And then finally, there's a consistency in government in Great Britain. Hey, we just finished the political revolutions in France. This looked like a good place to start a new business? I think not. Okay. Whereas in Britain, yes, they're going through some political turmoil and so forth, but the constitutional monarchy, whereby there's a parliament where the bourgeois and other classes are represented in the government, will allow for merchants and businessmen to call for their own interests to be implemented by the British government. And this form of government is much more stable, even if the king passes away. Okay? There is very few, seldom succession crises in Great Britain, as opposed to like places we see in France, post-Napoleonic period, and so forth. And all of this is going to answer the question as to why the Industrial Revolution occurred in Great Britain. And if anybody asks you, you can say it's all just magic. Haha. All right. The end result is Great Britain becomes the key industrial power in the 19th century. And as a result, the British Empire is going to grow all across the world here. And that leads us to our third question of review. Okay. So, using the content of our lectures so far and your own prior knowledge, create a 2 to 3 sentence context statement for this particular thesis statement right here. Okay. Evaluate the consequences of the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain, and here's the thesis. As a result of the Industrial Revolution, new classes would challenge the influence of nobility and the economic growth that would make British politics and culture the most dominant in the world. So, what brought about all of this here? Okay, and I got a few suggestions for you. Okay, do talk about, okay, some of the new classes that would lead to the Industrial Revolution. Okay, and not only that, okay, but okay, some of the impacts, okay, it has on British politics and culture as well. So key in on these particular points. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video right there, before we move on to the rest. All right, guys, we're back to the final part here. Okay, the Industrial Revolution, okay, is going to expand further out. Okay, private industry is going to grow in the United States. Many ideas will find themselves flowing from the U.S. to places like Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. But particularly these resource-rich countries like the U.S. and Germany will challenge British dominance, of um, development. And particularly in the US, eh, there is the development of what is often known as the second industrial revolution. Again, we talk about things like chemistry, electricity, okay, mass development. Here, this grand picture of the building of the Manhattan Bridge from Brooklyn to Manhattan Island, okay, and eventually things like assembly lines and so forth, okay, utilizing new synthetics that are made from chemistry and so forth here. So, the second industrial revolution. Other states, however, were more hesitant, or as it turns out, they were prevented from industrializing. Two that we're going to look at in greater detail are Russia, Egypt, and Japan. So let's start off and talk about Russia for a little bit here. In Russia, okay, there was this fear, that if Russia implements industrial policies, okay, that serfs will find themselves in the cities, as they migrate or try to fight for their freedom to move to cities. Um, and not only that, but the fear that a middle class would eventually overthrow the Russian Tsar. And so, as a result of this, Russia did not industrialize until it may have been a little bit too late in the late 19th century. Okay. Furthermore, okay, you have states like Egypt, which actually technically was a part of the Ottoman Empire, okay, but okay, there was the pursuit of state-sponsored industrialization by a Ottoman bureaucrat by the name of Muhammad Ali, the original Muhammad Ali, pictured right here, and he's going to implement new industries in Egypt by expanding agriculture, by creating new canals and irrigation and so forth, selling it on the market, and investing in industrial development. But unfortunately, Britain is going to undersell Egyptian industry, leading Egypt to finance itself not by industry, but again, like we see with India, cash crops. Okay, and like I mentioned, India, which at some point previously was the king of homespun, individually made fine cotton cloth and other textile material, okay, which Columbus and other explorers had been seeking um, for generations and generation. All of a sudden now, British produced industrial cloth is going to undercut and undersell India. And just like with Egypt, they're now stuck with selling and growing cotton for export. That is all being produced in Great Britain and then eventually being sold back in India at a much higher price, all at the profit of the British manufacturers. Okay. And so we end here. We're going to continue to talk about some of the consequences of the Industrial Revolution later on. Okay, but for now, this is it. All right. Thanks, you guys.